Hey class, Prof JC here, and this week we are looking at chapters 4, 5, and 6, and we're going to talk a lot about feelings. Nothing more than feelings. If you heard that song before, most of you in this class are way too young to know that song. I think it was back in the 80s, the 70s or 80s. That song came out. I want to talk about that today, feelings, and how important they are, and how important they are to manage when we're having these difficult conversations that you will have. And as a matter of fact, I would say this, that when you don't understand your feelings, it's going to make it much more difficult to have the difficult conversation, because you're going to be led by your emotions, you're going to be led by your feelings, as opposed to being led by the conversation, the vision that you need to have, that conversation that you need to have so that people get better. See, this is the thing about difficult conversations. We have these difficult conversations. Why? Because we want to get better. We want the other person to get better. It's always in their best interest, okay? It's in our best interest, mutual benefit, okay? And so it's important for us to understand this. So chapter 4, we're not really looking even at chapter 4, but chapter 5 and 6, they start talking about this thing called feelings. And then kind of what we need to think before we go into a conversation. Here's what I want to encourage you to do, okay? Anytime you go into a difficult conversation, you're going to have certain feelings about it. It's just the way it is. We are human beings. We're emotional creatures, okay? It's one of the reasons why AI is probably going to take over in a lot of ways, because a lot of these business people who own these companies and manufacture and all that, they get tired of having people call out sick every single day and all that stuff. I'm not saying whether they're right or wrong. It just is. And so one of the things they get most excited about is having these robots that are working these warehouses, because when the robots are working the warehouses, they don't call in sick. And if one of them stops working, you just bring in someone who's a mechanic, and they fix it and they put it right back out there on the floor, and it's going to work a 20-hour shift, maybe 4 hours off. Right? Human beings, we're not that way. We are emotional beings. We get upset, we get tired, we get exhausted. We need mental health breaks and mental health days and all this other kind of stuff. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It just is. And so when we're getting ready to go into a difficult conversation, if we're not careful, we're driven by our feelings and the emotions, because we are emotional beings. We're driven by that as opposed to facts and what's the situation and what's the vision that we want to come out of that. How do we want to help the other person get better? How do we want to help the situation get better? That's how we should be thinking. And so here's what I want to recommend that you do, okay? The next time you get ready to go into a difficult conversation, the first thing I want you to do, now this book has got a lot of things, but I'll tell you, I'm probably even a little bit too, it gets too mushy for even me. Okay. I'm going to be honest with you about that. But there's a lot of good suggestions in chapters 4, chapters 5, chapter 6. But here's what I want to recommend you do. And this is something I have done in my own life, and it really, really helps. Before you go into any difficult conversation, and after you come out of a difficult conversation, spend time journaling about whatever it is that you're going to talk about. I can't stress this enough. And I know some of you hear that word journal and you get scared of it. I don't know why so many people are scared of journaling. It is one of the best practices I've ever picked up in my entire life. I have whole days where I get up and I'm grumpy and I'm upset and I'm mad. And all I do is spend 20 to 30 minutes in my journal and just get all the thoughts out. I do what I call a mind dump, and just any thought that's in my head, good or bad, whatever it is, I just throw it in on a sheet of paper. I've got a Word doc, I've got my different journals for different years. And I've always told people that when I die, those things are going to be the first thing to get burnt. Okay. Nobody's ever going to read these things. And that's the point of a journal. I get to say whatever I want. If I'm mad at somebody, I can say whatever I want. I've cussed out so many people in my journal, you have no idea. But that's okay. That's the place to do it. So I don't get into a difficult conversation and find myself getting emotional and cussing them out, right? That's never okay. And so what we do is we kind of get into the journal, and then we kind of write out our frustrating feelings. Now, I'm not always good about that. Matter of fact, as I'm recording this today I was on the call with my bank, and I'm thinking about this right now. I'm thinking, man, I didn't do a great job. They were frustrating me so much. I was out of town last week, 4th of July. I lost my debit card. And so I had to call it in, and they said it'd be here within a day, and here it's Monday. But they didn't explain, hey, it's it's well, I guess they did, and they re-explained it to me today. I didn't hear it. It's a business day, okay? And so the first person who got on the call, just a horrible attitude, and I'm pretty great, I would say, with customer service. I've worked it, I've waited tables, but this person, I lost my cool on this person today, okay? Now, if I would have just journaled, maybe there's some frustrating things going on. I got up today, and you know what is interesting is I'm confessing to you right now, I didn't journal today. I typically get up. I have so much work that I had to do today, but typically I get up before I do anything, and I just hop in the journal, just mind dump and get all the thoughts out, and then I have a clear mind to do the work. I didn't do it today. Matter of fact, I said I had this thing I was working on yesterday. I said I need to get it done, so let's get right into it. And then you know how life is; you just get busy and busy. So anyway. I didn't journal. I didn't get out the negative thoughts. And so I took it out on this guy who was not being very good himself. He was not being a good customer service rep in my defense, but I took it out on him. So the point I'm trying to make is whenever we have a difficult conversation, it really helps to kind of get those feelings out first. Okay. That's going to be an important one. And then, so here's what I want you to do. Here's the first question that I want you, and you get to come up with your own. And even if you don't journal, I want you to answer this question, okay? Because I think it's something you should consider. Why is journaling good for a difficult conversation? Now you get to make up the answer, okay? Because what's good for you may be different for me than the person next to you and the person next to you, right? And I would also say that when you come out of a difficult conversation, get in the journal. Okay. And if it's a difficult conversation that someone has brought to you, maybe they're bringing something to your attention that's uncomfortable, you hop in the journal and you talk about that thing. You get out all your feelings. And if you're mad at them, you say whatever you want in the journal because no one's ever going to see it. Okay. You make sure you have your journal password protected. That's really important. So that's the first thing I want you to consider. Why is journaling important for difficult conversations? And then the second thing, okay, well, I guess that's the first thing. As we come into chapter 6, the book talks about 3 things to accept about yourself, okay? And I just want to read a little bit for you right here on page 119. No doubt there are some aspects of who you are that will struggle, that you will struggle with for a lifetime. And that is true. You know those aspects, and that's who needs to know it. Right? I know those aspects about myself. You know those aspects about yourself that probably we will struggle with for a lifetime. When you look inside, you won't always like what you see. And isn't that the truth? This is why a lot of people don't journal. And you'll find that accepting those parts of yourself takes serious work. Absolutely. But as you move away from an all or nothing identity and towards a more complex view of who you are, and see, that's the key in all this is understand that we are all complex beings. What we typically do is we look at other people and say that they're complex, but we're not. And we fail to realize that we're just as complex as they are. Okay. So as you move away from this all or nothing and you see how complex you are, you'll notice that it is easier to accept certain parts of yourself that have given you trouble in the past. Right? There are 3 characteristics that are particularly important to be able to accept about yourself in difficult conversations. The more easily you can admit to your own mistakes, your own mixed intentions, and your own contributions to the problem. That's it. That's systems thinking, right? It's not looking at the person and blaming them. It's saying, what did I help do to cause this? Okay. The more balanced you will feel during the conversation and the higher the chances it will go well. So again, so what this is saying is if I come to the table and I understand my own flaws, my own complexity, my own intentions, my own motivations, dark, some good, some dark, right? If I understand this stuff and I see myself for who I am, it's so much easier than to look at other people and see them for who they are. Okay. And we have more patience, more empathy. It's the people who come to conversations, and you've had them before. That boss that comes in and they have no empathy for you, they have no care for you. They're judgmental. They have this feeling that they're way up here and you're way down here. Those are the kind of people. Those are the kind of people right there that typically are not the people we want to have conversations with, right? But these are people who lack humility. They lack the ability to see themselves for who they are, okay? So here are the 3 things to accept about yourself anytime you're going into a difficult conversation. And because you're journaling now, you're going to be able to do this even better. Number 1, you will make mistakes. Okay. If you can't admit to yourself that you sometimes make mistakes, you find it more difficult to understand and accept the legitimate aspects of the other person's story about what is going on. So you got to understand this. You make mistakes just as the person that you're having a difficult conversation with, maybe they've made mistakes, you have too. Okay. That's tougher when you get to be a parent because there are times that we look at our kids and we look at the stupid decisions they're making and we forget we made that same stupid decision 20 years ago or 30 years ago, whatever it might be. But we got to understand that if we want to be more empathetic as leaders, and that's what this is all about, it's leadership communication. If we want to be better, it's understanding that we're frail, so is the person sitting in front of us. And number two, your intentions are complex. Okay. Your intentions are complex. Sometimes we get nervous about upcoming conversations because we know that our past behavior was not always motivated by good intentions. That's important for you to admit to yourself and say that, you know what? I haven't always had great motivations. I haven't always had great intentions. That's hard for us to admit to ourselves, but that's important for us. And again, once we can admit that, again, we come much more authentic to the conversation. We take off all the airs and the masks and all the things that we hide behind because we understand that we're that person we're having a difficult conversation was just as human as we are. And then number three, and this is the toughest one, and this is why a lot of people don't like to reflect. You have contributed to the problem. A third crucial step for grounding yourself, again, before you go into the conversation. I don't care where you're at in the orbit around this person you're getting ready to have a difficult conversation with, is for you to understand what you have done to contribute to the problem. So it says a third crucial step for grounding yourself involves assessing and taking responsibility for what you contributed to the problem. And you say, well, Prof. JC, well, here's the deal. I'm going to this conversation, but it's the other person. They're coming at me and they're saying things about me and they're saying things that I don't agree with. Well, see, if you have a mindset that I didn't do anything wrong, then you're going to come into the conversation no matter what side of the table you're sitting on, and you're not going to be able to reflect and say, what did I bring to this? What is my responsibility in all of this? You know, one of the things we talk about in corporate training, and I didn't come up with this saying here, but it's extreme ownership. It's actually Jocko Willink. Jocko Willink. That's how you say his last name. Former Navy SEAL. He's got a great podcast out there. And this is one of the things he talks about is extreme ownership. No matter what it is, there's something I did to contribute to the problem. I get in a car accident. I get rear-ended. I get sideswiped, whatever it is. And it's not my fault legally. It's not my fault on paper. Okay. I can still sit down and say, well, what did I do to maybe cause that? Maybe I wasn't very aware. Maybe I stayed up too late the night before and didn't get the sleep I needed. And so because of that, I wasn't as aware. I wasn't as good of a defensive driver as I should have been. You know, whatever it is. Now, I know that there are certain things in life that aren't always your responsibility. Now I'm going to backtrack that. I would say many things, about 95%. There's always that 5% that we can't, take into account. Here's the example that I'm thinking right now that I know some people want to push back on. You might be thinking, well, that relationship I was in, that person was horrible and they did me dirty. Why did you choose that person? Ooh, just want you to think about that. You've got that employee who's not getting the job done. They're lazy and they're not showing up and they're calling out and they're just a cancer to the team. Yeah, they might be. Why did you hire that person? Oh, my boss this, my boss that, my boss this, says this and does this, and horrible boss. Well, why did you choose to work there? So you see what I'm saying? There's extreme ownership on all sides. And when you're able to take that and you're able to understand that you've contributed to the problem, okay? So whatever it is sitting in front of you, whether they're having a difficult conversation with you or you're having a difficult conversation with them, you have contributed to the problem. When you can begin to think extreme ownership, I promise you your life is going to move to the next level. This is deep. If you let it be, this will be deep. Okay. So here's the question that I have for you. Why is it? Two questions I have for you. Out of the three things that we just mentioned, 3 things to accept about yourself, which stands out most to you? Okay. So that's the first part of this question. And the second part is, why do most people have a hard time thinking from the position of extreme ownership? Okay. So again, of the three things, now these aren't the only questions. You got to go back and watch the whole video. There's more questions in here. But of the three things that we just talked about, which one resonates most with you? And then a flip, another question I want you to reflect on. Why is it that most people have a hard time thinking from the position of extreme ownership? That I had something to do with this problem as well. I look forward to your reflection answers. Thanks so much for watching. I'll see you soon.